Welcome to the overview video for Chapter 12, Instrumental Music in the 17th Century. Our learning objectives are number 1, to name and describe briefly the most important genres and styles of instrumental music in the early Baroque period. Number 2, to name and describe the varieties of instrumental music from France, England, and Spain in the 17th century, including the dance, suite, and the most common types of dances. And number 3, to trace the development of ensemble music and orchestral music in Italy in this period and describe the style of chorelli. The rise of instrumental music during the Renaissance and its coming of age in the Baroque era is evident in the cultivation of new instruments, new roles for instrumental music, new genres, and new styles. Instrumental music continued to gain independence from vocal music as composers focused on specific instruments and ensemble sizes. The main genres of instrumental music in the Baroque can be viewed as variations, abstract types, and dance music. Keyboard and lute composers wrote variations, sometimes called partita. The most common variation techniques were: the melody is largely unchanged and is surrounded by contrapuntal lines. The melody is in the top voice and is embellished differently in each variation, and variations occur on a bass or harmonic plan rather than on a melody. The chaconne and passacaglia were variations over a ground bass in triple meter. Abstract instrumental music includes improvisatory works, continuous works such as pieces in imitative counterpoint, and sectional works. Toccatas and other improvisatory pieces were played on harpsichord or organ. Girolamo Frescobaldi, 1583 to 1643, was one of the first composers to focus primarily on instrumental music. As an organist at St. Peter's, he composed keyboard works and had many wealthy and prestigious patrons. His music was known internationally even after his death. He influenced later composers, including J.S. and C.P.E. Bach. The toccatas typically featured several brief sections, each focused on a different figure. Frescobaldi used toccatas as service music in 3 organ masses in a collection titled Fiori Musicali, or Musical Flowers, from 1635. Johann Jacob Froberger, 1616 to 1667, studied with Frescobaldi and wrote toccatas that alternate improvisatory passages with sections in imitative counterpoint. The 17th century Ricercar was a serious work for organ or harpsichord in which one subject is continuously developed in imitation. In the early 17th century, the term fugue became the name for a genre of serious pieces that treat one theme in continuous imitation. The keyboard fantasia was on a larger scale and had a more complex formal organization than Ricercar. The leading genre for viol consort in England was the imitative fantasia or fancy, which could treat one or more subjects. The canzona features several contrasting sections, each of which treats a different theme in imitation or offers a non-imitative section for contrast. In the 17th century, sonata came to refer to a work for 1 or 2 melody instruments with basso continuo. The solo writing was often idiomatic and imitated vocal styles. Biagio Marini, 1594 to 1663, worked at St. Mark's in Venice and at other posts in Italy and Germany. His solo violin sonatas resemble instrumental monody with many idiomatic gestures. Organ music enjoyed a golden age in the Lutheran areas of Germany between about 1650 and 1750. Dietrich Buxtehude, around 1637 to 1707, was one of the best-known Lutheran composers of the late 17th century. Toccatas were composed of a series of short sections in free style that alternated with longer ones in imitative counterpoint. Later, the fugal and non-fugal sections became separate movements, creating a toccata, or prelude, and fugue. Most Protestant organ music, including chorale preludes, toccatas, and preludes with fugues served as a prelude to part of the liturgy. Lutheran composers set chorale melodies in a number of different ways. In the organ chorale, the tune was enhanced by harmony and counterpoint. In the chorale variation, also called chorale partita, the chorale tune served as the theme for a set of variations. In a chorale fantasia, the composer fragmented the chorale melody and developed the resulting motives through virtuoso fingerwork, echoes, imitative counterpoint, and ornamentation. The term chorale prelude is often applied to any chorale-based organ work, but it also denotes a short piece in which the melody is presented just once. Because of its popularity at court, lute music flourished in France during the early 17th century and left a permanent mark on French keyboard style. The leading lute composer was Denis Gaultier, 1603 to 1672, whose two published collections instructed amateurs how to play the lute. During the century, the clavecin displaced the lute as the main solo instrument, and composers such as Elizabeth Claude Jacquet de la Guerre, 1665 to 1729, and Francois Couperin, 1668 to 1733, marketed their music collections to an amateur public. Jacquet de la Guerre was recognized as one of the greatest talents of her time. She was a child prodigy who performed at King Louis XIV's court from the age of 5. Best known for her harpsichord pieces and cantatas, she was the first French woman to write a ballet and an opera. Lutenists systematically developed the use of agréments, which became a fundamental element of French music. The style lute style, sometimes called style brisé or broken style, was imitated by harpsichord composers and became an intrinsic part of French harpsichord style. Dances formed the core of the lute and keyboard repertoire. Most 17th century dances were in binary form, a form used for dances in other instrumental genres over the next 2 centuries. Typical of Denis Gaultier's own personal style is his courant Les Coquettes Virtuoses, the virtuous coquette, from La Rhétorique des Dieux, the rhetoric of the gods, around 1650. French composers grouped dances into suites. Typically, a suite begins with a prelude, often an unmeasured prelude, and continues with dances like the Allemande, Courante, Sarabande, Gigue, Gavotte, and Minuet. Jacquet de la Guerre's Suite No. 3 in A minor also includes a chaconne in the form of a rondeau, in which a refrain alternates with couplets. The French style was almost as influential as Italian music, and the integration of the two became one of the themes of the 18th century. Italian composers dominated instrumental chamber music during the 17th and early 18th centuries, as they did in opera and cantata. Violin makers in Cremona developed their art to a level that has never been surpassed. Antonio Stradivari, around 1644 to 1737, was the most prominent member of his renowned family of instrument makers, and some of today's leading string players use his instruments. By the end of the century, the sonata became a multi-movement work with contrasts between movements. By about 1660, 2 main types of sonata emerged: the sonata da camera, which is a chamber sonata, or a suite of stylized dances often opening with a prelude, and the sonata da chiesa, or church sonata, containing mostly abstract movements. A trio sonata features 2 treble instruments with basso continuo. Solo sonatas gained popularity after 1700. Ensemble sonatas featured up to 8 instrumental parts with continuo. The sonatas and concertos of Arcangelo Corelli, 1653 to 1713, are the best-known Italian works from this time. Corelli studied violin and composition in Bologna and by 1675 he was living in Rome and enjoying the support of rich patrons. He raised performing standards, and his teaching was the foundation of most 18th century schools of violin playing. He composed only instrumental works, and they made him famous across Europe. In his trio sonatas, Corelli treated the violins alike, focusing on lyricism rather than virtuosity. Typical traits of his style include a walking bass, chains of suspensions, sequences, and a dialogue between the violins. Corelli's church sonatas often include 4 movements in the pattern slow, fast, usually consisting of a majestic first movement, a fugue, a slow duet in triple meter, and a fast dance. His chamber sonatas typically begin with a prelude followed by 2 or 3 dance movements. Corelli's solo violin sonatas use the same format as his trio sonatas, but demand more virtuosity. In the sonatas, movements are based on a single subject stated at the outset, which is then expanded through sequences, variations, and modulations. Corelli's music is tonal, and he uses suspensions and sequences to achieve the sense of forward harmonic motion on which tonality depends. Corelli's sonatas served as models that composers followed for the next half-century, and his compositions have become classics. In the 17th century, musicians began to distinguish between chamber music for one player on a part and orchestra music for more than one on a part. The instrumental concerto was a new genre that emerged in the 1680s and 1690s and became the most prestigious Baroque instrumental genre. The ensemble sonata had a long life in Germany. Cities employed Stadtpfeifer, or town pipers, and in Lutheran areas also hired church musicians. Many musicians in Germany and Austria traveled from job to job to find the best situation. Many German towns had a collegium musicum, a group of amateurs who gathered to play and sing music for their own pleasure or to hear professionals in private performance. Composers in Germany often studied abroad and blended Italian, French, and native styles in new ways. For your 25-point quiz, I would know about variation technique. I would know about passacalias. I would know about frescobaldi. I would know about fugues, fantasias, sonatas, canzonas. I would know about Biagio Marini and Dietrich Buxtehude. I would know about chorale preludes. I would know about agreements. I would know about style brisé. I would know about lute and harpsichord music. I would know about dance music. I would know about binary form and know about Elizabeth Claude Jacquet de la Guerre. I would know about suites. Know about the French Baroque suite and style. Know about the Sonata de Chiesa. Know about the violin makers in Cremona. Know about Nicola Amati. Know about Corelli. Know about trio sonatas. Know about Francois Couperin. And know about the German Stadtpfeifer. And that should do it.